السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. هل الصهيونية هي العدو الحقيقي لليهود؟ ملحمة تاريخية تروي تفاصيل سيطرة الصهيونية على الفكر والأرض والمسار في فلسطين المحتلة وفي العالم، والكل يراقب. كتاب الصهيونية العدو الحقيقي لليهود بأجزائه الثلاثة من الداخل. معكم زينب الصفار، تابعونا. بعبارات التحسر والأسى على جهل المواطن الأمريكي العادي حقائق الأمور في مسألة الصراع العربي الإسرائيلي والتأثير الهائل الذي يمارسه اللوبي الصهيوني على الإدارة الأمريكية، يبدأ آلان هارت الصحفي البريطاني المتخصص في شؤون الشرق الأوسط كتابه الصهيونية العدو الحقيقي لليهود، ويناشد الشعب الأمريكي الصحوة والتيقن. الكتاب الذي يقع في 3 مجلدات والذي جاء بعد انقطاع هارت 20 عاما عن التأليف بعد كتابه عرفات إرهابي أم صانع سلام، يتطرق فيه إلى الحركة الصهيونية وتاريخها وحاضرها والمصطلحات التي تمت إليها بصلة، وإلى أبعاد الفكر الصهيوني وأهدافه. آلان هارت المقدم السابق لبرنامج بانوراما الBBC اعتمد في معلوماته على معايشة قادة سياسيين من طرفي الصراع العربي الإسرائيلي، ومنهم ياسر عرفات وغولدا مائير، وبالتالي على معرفة خفايا الدبلوماسية السرية في الشرق الأوسط. وبسبب أسلوبه المثير فقد وصفه البعض بأنه أسهم في بلورة نموذج جديد من الصحافة التي تدخل المتفرج في العالم الحقيقي. ومما كتب هارت منتقدا الصهيونية أنها مشروع استعماري أفسد كل ما لامسه انطلاقا من الأمم المتحدة ووسائل الإعلام الغربية الرئيسية وما يسمى الديمقراطية في العالم الغربي وخاصة في أمريكا، وحتى اليهودية نفسها، ما سيؤدي باليهود إلى الهاوية. وهذا بحسب هارت نتيجة الأساطير التي تروجها الصهيونية من جهة وعدم معرفة الحقائق التاريخية من جهة أخرى. هارت الصحافي المخضرم كيف يشرح المخاطر الآنية والبعيدة المدى من جراء الدعم غير المشروط والمفرط للصهيونية ولسياساتها العدوانية والقمعية ضد الفلسطينيين، وما سر الصلة الوثيقة بين حرب 67 ومشروع الصهيونية. Mr. Alan Hart, author of Zionism, The Real Enemy of the Jews, in its 3 volumes. Welcome to the Inside, sir.
It's a pleasure to be with you.
Our pleasure, sir. Now, why did you resort into using this incendiary title in the 3 volumes?
Zionism, The Real Enemy of the Jews. Well, the book is about, let me say, is about much more than its title suggests. It's a complete rewriting of the entire history of the conflict from the beginning to Obama's surrender to the Zionist lobby. And what I've done is I've exposed all of Zionism's propaganda lies and replaced them with the truth of history. I mean, I've been covering the Middle East for nearly half a bloody century, and I knew leaders on both sides. But to answer your question directly, why that title? What we are witnessing in the world today, at the level of people, if not governments, is a rising tide of anti-Israelism. It's not anti-Semitism, it's anti-Israelism being provoked by Israel's own criminal policies and actions. But as a man called Huckabee, who was one of Israel's longest-serving directors of military intelligence, warned in a book some years ago, there is a danger that anti-Israelism can be transformed into anti-Semitism. I think that will happen unless 2 things happen. One is that the mainly Gentile world, where most Jews live, has got to be educated and informed about the difference between Zionism and Judaism. So you don't automatically blame one, because Zionism and Judaism are total opposites. But also, the Jews of America and Europe, they have got to distance themselves from the Zionist monster. Now, unless those two things happen, I think I'm willing to predict that at a foreseeable point in the future there will be another great turning against the Jews. So let me tell you, I am driven by two things. Justice for the Palestinians for its own sake. The reason why I admire the occupied and oppressed Palestinians is if there's any people on earth who ought to have been dehumanized by what has been happening to them and is still happening, it's them. They have not been dehumanized, but their oppressors have. So one of my driving motivations is...
And they are, bounding themselves behind this wall that they are constructing. I mean, this separation wall, it's not to put the Palestinians away, but they are putting themselves away.
Well, there's a sentence in my...
Locking themselves behind a wall.
There's a sentence in my book where I say we can expect to see an exodus of sensible Jews from Israel, and we'll end up with a walled-in, nuclear-armed fortress dominated by Zionist madmen that will be prepared to tell the whole world to go to hell. Mm-hmm. So those are my two driving motivations: to contribute to the understanding needed for justice for the Palestinians, for its own sake, but to stop the countdown to catastrophe for all of us, but also to contribute to the understanding needed to stop what I call Holocaust 2. I don't mean gas ovens again, I don't want any of that, but I do mean another great turning against the Jews.
What is it about you, sir, and about your book that so frightens Zionism to the extent of resorting to certain kind of tactics that subvert, what passes for democracy?
Well, Zionism has a simple strategy for dealing with me, and it's a very old one. The top level where they make their propaganda policy, the instruction went out: have nothing to do with Alan Hart and his book. Don't give him and it the oxygen of publicity.
Mm-hmm. This is what actually happened.
This is what actually happened. So there was not one newspaper in this country that would review it. But also, so I'm red flagged by Zionism.
No TV station, no radio station.
No.
Yes.
And this, given the fact that I was a famous, celebrated TV correspondent in days gone by.
BBC and the ITN.
And ITN. Sure. So they can close things down. No, so, and if you take book publishers, what is it that they're frightened of? Well, there are a disproportionate number of Jewish authors who write, great novels and things for the publishing houses. They're frightened that their authors would be ordered to pull the plug. If you look at newspapers, they don't exist to give us news. They exist to sell advertising space. And they fear that if they offended Zionism too much, the advertising plugs will be pulled. So there's a total suppression of me and my work and truth-telling, but not just me. Most truth-tellers are suppressed. But I tell you what is tragic. The Arab regimes are at one with Zionism in wanting to suppress the truth. I mean, if we're going to talk, as I hope we are, about some of the lies of history...
This is just analysis or information?
No. I am absolutely red-flagged by the Arab regimes. I didn't set out to offend them. I spent 5 years researching and writing this book and drawing off decades of my own knowledge of the conflict. I didn't set out to offend the Arab regimes for the hell of it. But you can't tell the truth, Zeinab, about Zionism unless you tell the truth about the Arab regimes as well. And one of the great truths is that Israel has never, ever been in danger of annihilation, the driving into the sea of its Jews. I mean, a little later, if you like, we go into that in more depth. But it never has. The truth of the matter is that when Israel closed the Palestine file in 1948, the Arab regimes wanted to keep it closed. They have never, ever had any intention of fighting Israel to liberate Palestine. So when you're telling the story of Zionism, you have to tell that story. So what I'm saying is, the Arab regimes, I'll go further, the impotent, corrupt, repressive Arab regimes, generally speaking, they are at one with Zionism in not wanting the truth of history to be told. But the Zionist lobby is arguably the most powerful, along with perhaps the gun lobby, and it does actually control policy for the Middle East. And right now, as we talk, the big question is a very simple one. Obama clearly knows that Iran doesn't possess nuclear weapons, doesn't want to possess nuclear weapons, and he wants to do a deal with them. The question is, will Israel and the Zionist lobby be able to sabotage that? We don't know. The coming weeks and months will tell us.
Right. Allow me here to ask you a question. What is a Zionist?
Well, fascinating, because most Jews don't even know what a Zionist is. Most Jews simply think that Zionism is the return of the Jews to their ancestral homeland. Mm-hmm. Well, first of all, it's not the ancestral homeland of most Jews. Yes, no doubt there are some Israeli Jews, a few, who can claim to be the descendants of the ancient Hebrews. Mm. But the vast majority of Jews who went to Israel in answer to Zionism's call had no biological connection whatsoever to the ancient Hebrews. They were converted to Judaism long after the ancient Hebrews had their brief rule. But what actually is Zionism? Zionism is the nationalism, neo-colonialist-like nationalism of some Jews, which created a state for some Jews by ethnic cleansing. And why do I say that Zionism and Judaism are total opposites? Judaism, like Islam, like Christianity, has at its core, at least modern Judaism does, not the ancient stuff with lots of vile things in it, but modern Judaism has at its core, like the other two religions, a set of moral values and ethical principles. Zionism has made a complete nonsense of all of those, has demonstrated complete contempt. What it actually said is, most Jews who would call themselves real followers of Judaism say, we can only return when Jesus comes back. Mm-hmm. What Zionism actually said is, we can't wait for him, we'll be Jesus, we'll be God, whatever.
We have to pave the way for the coming back of Jesus. Yeah. Right, Mr. Hart, we're going to stop now for a short break, and then when we come back we're going to talk a bit further about Zionism and its relation to our region. فاصل قصير ونعود، لا تذهبوا بعيدا.
the settlers. We are here out the settlers.
مؤلف كتاب الصهيونية العدو الحقيقي لليهود الصحافي البريطاني آلان هارت، هل يرى أن من الممكن تجنب التصادم بين الحضارات أي اليهودية والمسيحية في مقابل الإسلام كما طرح في مقدمة المجلد الثاني لكتابه؟
I'm not sure. I mean, what really troubles me, also very early in volume 1 of my book, I quote a statement from Golda Meir. I was doing a panorama interview with her, and she said something that caused me to say to her, I want to understand what you just said, Prime Minister. You are saying that in a doomsday situation, Israel would be prepared to take the region and the world down with it. And without a pause, she said, yes, that's exactly what I'm saying. But what was incredible, that interview was transmitted at 8 o'clock on a Monday evening. By 9 o'clock, the Times of London, then a seriously good newspaper, not the Murdoch rag it is today, it had changed its lead editorial to quote what Golda had said to me, and then it added its own opinion. We had better believe her. So I think in terms of a clash of civilization, certainly I think Zionism would be prepared to play its part in it. Mm-hmm. But then you have to look at American presidents, the neocons, and I would call Tony Blair a neocon. Mm-hmm. And you have to ask, because what is true is that it's American-driven Western foreign policy that is the best recruiting sergeant for violent Islamic fundamentalism in all of its strands. I mean, look, there are about 1.5 billion Muslims in the world. The vast majority of them don't wish to be enemies of America. They wish to be friends. As a matter of fact, very many Muslims would go and live in America if they could to have a better life. It is American foreign policy, and in particular its support for the Zionist state of Israel, right or wrong, that is driving and is the recruiting sergeant for violent Islamic fundamentalism. So you have to ask the question, when you look at the presidents and neocons, you have to say, is it A or B? Are they absolutely stupid and don't understand what their policies are doing because they don't really understand the dynamics?
But the people stood in the face of, for example, US President Obama, this time when he wanted to open fire on the Syrians.
Oh yeah, but let's come back to that. What I'm saying is, given that American foreign policy is the recruiting sergeant, I'm trying to answer your earlier question. Do these neocon leaders and presidents, do they not know what they're doing? Are they stupid? Or do they want a clash of civilization? Mm-hmm. Are they purposely fueling this? I've asked many of my dearest friends of all faiths and none, and they've all said, Alan, we don't know the answer to that question. But you mentioned, it was the British that first of all said no to an attack on Syria.
Sure.
And then we know that Congress... Mm-hmm. Now that's very important. It offers a glimmer of hope. I said I wanted to make democracy work. Maybe we have seen the first little sign that democracy can come alive. Because as I write in my book, nothing is going to change in America vis-à-vis policy for the Israel-Palestine conflict until congressmen and women are more frightened of offending their voters than they are of offending the Zionist lobby. Mm-hmm. Now, what we've just witnessed over the attack on Syria or not may indicate that what I was saying is true. But Americans generally have got to be much better informed than they are to make their congressmen.
Right. Allow me now to take you back to the 1967 war. How is it linked to Zionism?
Well, Zionism's whole story is a total lie from beginning to end. I mentioned earlier, Israel's existence has never ever been in danger from any combination of Arab force. Not even in 1948, the Arab regimes didn't intend to wipe out Israel. They came somewhat reluctantly, put some of their forces in to try to hold the land that the partition plan had assigned to the Palestinian state. As you know, within a short time at the start of the war, there was a truce. When the fighting was resumed, it was 90,000 well-armed Jews against 20,000 poorly armed Arab soldiers. It was no contest. 1967, I was there. I persuaded ITN to send me out 3 weeks in advance because I knew my gut was telling me war was coming. Zionism's first story was that the Arabs attacked. Its second story was, well, they were intending to attack, so we had to have a preemptive strike. Mm-hmm. That's complete nonsense. It was a well-prepared plan. And so far as its planners were concerned, including Moshe Dayan, for example, the one-eyed warlord, it was to complete the work done in 1948 that they didn't complete. And years later, Sharon made a comment too. He said, of course, it was all about water. Well, look where the main settlements are now. They control the water supplies of the West Bank. But, I mean, the greater Zionist vision, as you know, was from the Euphrates to the Nile.
From the sea to the river.
I mean, it's my expectation that at some point in the future, Israel will attack Hezbollah again, mm-hmm. and will go to the Litani. Mm-hmm. Now, I know Hezbollah is well armed and it can cause some serious problems, but the last time Israel attacked Lebanon, it made the mistake of doing it by air. So it did a lot of destruction because it didn't want body bags coming back to the people of Israel. But I think next time...
Well, there was also a ground assault that went hand in hand with the air
but it wasn't
assault.
a major one.
It wasn't a major one because they received a severe blow from the resistance fighters back then.
Well, that's true, but
That was their failure, actually, the failure of the intelligence and the failure in going into a ground assault in Lebanon.
But that's why they concentrated on air. But I think
Yes.
the next time they attack Hezbollah, which I think they will do, I think they're itching to do it. I think.
But can they do it?
Yes, I think it will be a major, major force. And
Why didn't they do it then in the last 7 years?
well, the time is not right yet. You see, Netanyahu is playing this Iranian card, as we all know. Now, unless he is deluded and clinically insane, he knows that Iran is not doesn't have a nuclear weapon, doesn't want a nuclear weapon. He's been playing up this threat simply to take the world's attention away from what Zionism is doing to consolidate its hold on the West Bank and what remains of Palestine.
Alan, do you believe that the Jews have been deceived by their warlords and Israeli spin doctors?
I think your phrasing "the Jews have been deceived" is not enough. The Jews have been brainwashed. They really have been brainwashed. And I'd tell you a very short story, and it's in my book, to illustrate this. My second best friend in the world after my wife is my Jewish accountant. I've actually known him for 40 years, and he's travelled the world with me, met people. I even introduced him to Golda Meir. And just before I published my book, I said to Morris, like 98% of all Jews, you believe that when Israel went to war in 1967, it was because the Arabs attacked, or were going to attack. I said, if I can prove to you, using only Israeli sources, that that's complete nonsense, what? And my dear friend paused, and he said, if what I believe about that war is not true, everything crumbles. Most Jews, sadly, although more and more are speaking out in America, but still few, most Jews do not want to know the truth of history. So it's not just conditioning, they don't want to know. Now, why don't they want to know? This is important. Deep down in the Jewish subconsciousness, if not more than that, there is the fear of Holocaust too. They fear it for two reasons. One, because of their history, but two, because their bloody leaders keep on telling them. Netanyahu is one of the biggest ones, you know.
Because
the
whoever
world hates
questions
us.
any of such issues is become a self-hating Jew.
Well, yes, a stupid phrase. But they do fear that they will need Israel as a refuge of last resort, the place to escape to at some point. So their logic is we mustn't say anything, do anything that hurts Israel, plays into its hands. But Zeinab, here we come to the biggest paradox in all of history. The Zionist state was created to be this sort of refuge, if you like, of last resort for the Jews. But it's Zionism's criminal policies and actions that are creating the anti-Semitism. First of all, by creating the anti-Israelism, which, as I say, there's real danger it will turn to anti-Semitism. That's an absurd paradox.
Now, why can't any Israeli leadership deliver a two-state solution, even if they wanted to?
Well, in 1980, I did some secret politics. I was the link man in an exploratory conversation between Arafat and Peres. Peres was then the leader of the main opposition party, hoping to win the next election and deny Begin a second term. So it was put to me by people at the highest level of the UN that we needed some informal diplomacy to try to bring the two together so that when Peres became Prime Minister, they could get him. Anyway, in my first conversation, to answer your question, in my first conversation with Peres, he said to me, I fear it's already too late. This is 1980. I said, why? He said, Begin knows exactly what he's doing. He's stuffing the West Bank with settlements to create a civil war situation because he knows that no Israeli Prime Minister is going down in history as the one who gave the order to the Jewish army to shoot Jews out of the West Bank. Peres paused and he said, I'm not. Zeinab, that was 1980. There were only 70,000 illegal settlers there. Today there are 600,000 if you include East Jerusalem. So the conditions for a Jewish civil war are there. It isn't going to happen. No Israeli prime minister is going to do that, even one who would like to.
Mm-hmm. You are one of the advocates of a one-stage solution. Do you ever think that this is going to take place?
Well, no, I think the most likely scenario is a final Zionist ethnic cleansing of Palestine, if you want to know what I honestly feel, which would maybe trigger in due course another turning against the Jews. I was always for a two-state solution for the same reason that Ilan Pappy was. Our hope was that a two-state solution within 1 or 2 generations would lead to such trust and mutual confidence in each other that one state would then come about by natural evolution. You see, let me make a statement. In my view, the Jews, generally speaking, are the intellectual elite of the Western world. The Palestinians are by far the intellectual elite of the Arab world. Together in peace and partnership, what they could do is the stuff that dreams are made of. They could change the region for the better, and by doing so they could give new hope and inspiration to the whole world. But it isn't going to happen because most Jews have been brainwashed and need to see themselves as victims. If you take victimhood away from a Jew, what is a Jew?
Right, Mr. Alan Hart, author of Zionism, The Real Enemy of the Jews, in its 3 volumes. Many thanks indeed for joining us.
My pleasure. I hope that was useful.
Yes, you're most welcome, sir. إذا لقاء جديد في الأسبوع المقبل مع ضيف جديد وقضية جديدة ودائما من الداخل. للمزيد من التواصل بريدنا theinsight@almayadeen.net من كل فريق عمل من الداخل من كل الميادين من لندن. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.